Have you ever had to smile while your heart was breaking? Have you ever had to keep walking while everything in you was begging to stop? Have you ever had to show up while your soul was still bleeding? If you know what that feels like, then today, this word is for you. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I came to speak to the people who don't have the luxury of falling apart. Some folks can disappear for 6 months, go on a healing retreat, sip herbal tea, and find themselves. But I'm talking to the people who have responsibilities, the people who have children counting on them, bills waiting on them, dreams calling to them, and life pushing them forward even when their soul is crying. Lord, give me a moment to breathe, because sometimes life won't wait on your healing. Life won't pause for your pain. Life won't stop because your soul is still bleeding. But hear me, bleeding does not mean you are broken. Wounded does not mean you are worthless. And hurting does not mean you are helpless. I came to tell you today, you can move ahead even when your soul is still bleeding, because God does his best work in the dark, in the broken, and in the in-between places of your life. A bleeding soul doesn't mean you're done. Sometimes we confuse the presence of pain with the absence of purpose. We think that because we are hurting, we must also be disqualified. We assume that because we are wounded, we have somehow lost our worth. But pain is not proof that you are finished. Pain is proof that something inside you is still alive, still tender, still capable of feeling, still capable of healing, still capable of rising again. Dead things don't bleed, only living things do. And the very fact that your soul is bleeding is the evidence that there is still something beating inside you, something God is not finished with yet. There are moments in life when the wound runs so deep that you wake up leaking pain. You carry it quietly while you move through your responsibilities. You smile at people who have no idea that something inside you is screaming. You show up to work with a heart that feels like it's been shattered overnight. You take care of your family while your own soul feels like it's unraveling. And you start to wonder, how can God use somebody like me? How can I be enough when I feel this broken? But brokenness is not the end of your usefulness. It is often the beginning. We grow up believing that strength means perfection, that power means never hurting, that faith means never struggling. But real strength is not the absence of pain. It is the courage to keep moving in spite of it. Real faith isn't the denial of your wounds. It's the decision to believe that the wound will not have the final say. You can be hurting and still be chosen. You can be bleeding and still be becoming. You can be broken and still be blessed. Think about every person in Scripture God ever used in a significant way. They all had a limp, a scar, a burden, or a wound that tried to convince them they were not enough. Moses stuttered. David sinned. Elijah battled despair. Paul had a thorn. Jesus himself bled. And yet every one of them fulfilled a purpose that was larger than the pain they carried. Why? Because pain doesn't pause God's plan. God doesn't wait for you to be flawless before he calls you. He doesn't wait for you to be healed before he sends you. He doesn't wait for your soul to stop bleeding before he begins working through you. God steps into your pain, not away from it. He works through the very places that feel the most fragile and says, even here you are mine. Even here I am with you. Even here you are not done. Sometimes the enemy whispers to you that the wound is a sign of weakness, that bleeding means failure, that hurting means you should quit. But bleeding is not a sign that you are weak. It is a sign that you survived what was meant to destroy you. It means you endured something that was strong enough to break you, but you're still here. It means the attack hit you, but it didn't end you. It means your heart took a blow, but it still has a beat left in it. You are breathing through the pain, and as long as there is breath, there is purpose. Your soul bleeding does not mean you lack faith. It doesn't mean you made the wrong decisions. It doesn't mean God abandoned you. Sometimes the bleeding comes from the very battle that was necessary for your becoming. Sometimes the wound is part of the transformation. Sometimes the pain is the doorway to a deeper strength. When a muscle is torn, it grows back stronger. When the heart breaks, it becomes more compassionate. When the soul bleeds, it becomes more honest, more awakened, more prepared for the next level of your life. You might still be bleeding from betrayal, but you're learning boundaries. You might still be bleeding from disappointment, but you're gaining discernment. You might still be bleeding from loss, but you're growing endurance. You might still be bleeding from heartbreak, but you're discovering identity. You might still be bleeding from failure, but you're developing resilience. Your bleeding season is not your breaking season. It is your becoming season. The pain you feel right now is shaping something inside you that comfort never could. Comfort never teaches you who you really are. Comfort never pushes you into purpose. Comfort never extracts the oil that pain produces. Some of the greatest versions of you only come forth when pressure hits and the soul begins to bleed. It is in that bleeding that you find out what you're made of, what you can survive, what you can overcome, and what God can rebuild in you. And hear this, you are not defective because you are still bleeding. You are human. You are evolving. You are in process. Healing is not a switch you flip. It is a journey you walk. And on that journey, you will have days when the wound feels fresh again. You will have moments when the bleeding surprises you. You will have seasons when the pain returns in waves. But none of that means you are done. It means you are still in motion, still becoming, still rising, still fighting, still living. A bleeding soul is not a finished story. It is a chapter in the making. And if you can keep moving, even with the blood still warm on your heart, you will discover that bleeding does not stop destiny. Pain does not cancel purpose, and wounds do not disqualify warriors. You are not done. You are in transition. You are not finished. You are being formed. And even with a bleeding soul, you are moving towards something greater than you've ever known. Movement is not the same as healing, but it can lead to it. A lot of people confuse motion with recovery, as if the simple act of getting out of bed or going back to work or smiling in public means the soul has somehow stopped hurting. But you and I know better. There are days when you move, not because you're healed, but because life demands that you keep going. There are mornings when you stand up, not because the weight has lifted, but because something deep in you refuses to stay down. And that movement, even though it's slow, even though it's shaky, even though it's painful, is still movement. Healing is not an instant miracle for most people. It's a process, a journey, a slow unraveling of pain, and a slow rebuilding of strength. And sometimes the healing doesn't start until you take the first step. It's not that the step heals you, it's that the step positions you for healing. Imagine a wounded soldier. If he stays on the battlefield, he'll bleed out. But if he drags himself toward safety, even if every inch feels like agony, he is still moving toward the possibility of survival. He's not healed, but he's in motion. And motion can save your life. Some people wait until they feel ready before they take action. But if you wait for readiness, you may wait forever. Pain rarely gives permission. Trauma doesn't schedule appointments. Heartbreak doesn't say, take your time. If anything, pain tells you to freeze. It tries to paralyze you, to convince you that staying still is safer than moving forward. Because movement requires bravery. Movement requires vulnerability. Movement requires faith. When your soul is bleeding, taking even one step feels like you're risking the little strength you have left. But staying still will trap you in the very place that wounded you. Movement is the statement your soul makes when your circumstances try to silence you. It is your declaration that pain will not petrify you. When you move, even when you don't feel like it, you break the agreement with stagnation. Healing rarely comes to people who remain in the same environment that wounded them. You must sometimes change the scenery, shift the atmosphere, disrupt the patterns, distance yourself from the triggers. Healing needs room to breathe, and sometimes movement creates that room. There's a paradox in the human experience. You can be hurting deeply and still functioning publicly. But functioning is not healing. Some people stay busy to avoid facing what's bleeding inside them. They fill their schedule so they don't have to feel their emotions. They drown themselves in tasks so they don't have to acknowledge the ache. And while movement in itself can be a gateway to healing, distraction can just as silly become a prison. You can move and still be stuck. You can run and still be stagnant. You can work and still be wounded. The kind of movement that leads to healing is intentional. It's when you say, I don't feel whole, but I refuse to stay broken. It's when you decide this step may hurt, But staying in this place hurts more. It's when you choose progress over paralysis. It's not about pretending you're fine. It's not about minimizing your pain. It's about acknowledging that healing often begins with decision, not emotion. Sometimes the emotions catch up later. Movement also creates momentum. The first step may feel impossible, but the second becomes a little easier. The third brings a bit more strength. You may not notice it at first. Healing is quiet, slow, and subtle, but every step begins to shift something inside you. You start to regain pieces of yourself. You start to breathe a little deeper. You start to see possibilities again instead of limitations. And before you know it, what once felt unbearable starts to feel manageable. There's a reason why grief counselors encourage people to maintain routines, because movement keeps you from sinking too deep. If you stop moving, your pain pools around you like water in a stagnant lake. It grows thicker, heavier, darker. But when you move, when you engage with the world, even minimally, you allow light to reach the areas inside you that are still wounded. Movement lets oxygen into the places your soul needs to heal. Even spiritually, movement attracts divine intervention. When you take a step, even a trembling one, heaven responds. God meets movement. God strengthens action. God blesses motion. The Bible says, as they went, they were healed. Not before they moved, butus they went. Healing came in the going. Breakthrough came in the movement. Restoration found them in motion. Your movement says to G.O.D., I don't feel whole, but I trust you enough to move anyway. And sometimes movement is simply refusing to let yesterday dictate tomorrow. Pain wants to tie you to the past. Movement breaks those chains. You may not be healed today, but the very act of moving means you believe in a future worth reaching for. Every step is a vote for your future. Every step is a refusal to surrender. Every step is proof that you're still in the fight. Movement doesn't mean you stop bleeding. Movement means you're choosing not to bleed in the same place forever. It means you're refusing to let pain pin you down. It means you're walking toward a version of yourself that you haven't met yet. A version that is stronger, wiser, softer, braver, and more whole than the person who was wounded. Healing will meet you on the journey. Not all at once, not always when you expect it, but step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment. And as long as you keep moving, even slowly, even weakly, even painfully, healing will find you. Movement is not healing, but it is the pathway to healing. And you are already on that path. God works while you hurt. That's one of the hardest truths to believe when your soul is bleeding. Because pain has a way of convincing you that God has gone silent. When you're hurting, it feels like heaven closes its doors, like your prayers evaporate before they reach God's ears, like the darkness around you has somehow swallowed the light that once guided your path. But pain is not the proof that God is absent. Pain is the place where God often does his deepest, quietest, most transformative work. Just because you can't feel him doesn't mean he isn't moving. Just because you can't see the evidence yet doesn't mean he isn't operating behind the scenes. God works in the shadows, in the empty spaces, in the midnight moments when your tears are your only company. He works while you hurt. When you're in pain, it's easy to assume that God is waiting for you to get it together. We imagine that God needs us strong before he steps in, that he needs us stable before he intervenes, that he needs our wounds stitched before he can use us. But God doesn't wait for your healing to begin his work. He works right in the middle of your hurt. He steps into the bleeding places and starts building something new. He steps into the shattered parts and begins rearranging the pieces. He steps into the chaos and starts whispering order. You may not see it yet, but every tear you cry waters a seed he planted long before the pain arrived. Sometimes the greatest miracles are the ones you don't recognize until after the storm has passed. When you look back one day, you'll realize that while you were breaking, God was building. While you were losing, God was aligning. While you were hurting, God was healing you in ways you didn't even know you needed. You prayed for him to take away the pain, but he was busy strengthening the parts of you that the pain revealed. You prayed for the storm to end, but he was using the storm to wash away what could no longer stay. You prayed for immediate relief, but he was preparing a long-term restoration. Pain has a way of stripping you down to your rawest form. It reveals your weaknesses, your fears, your insecurities, and the places you've tried to hide from yourself. But even in those exposed places, God is working. He doesn't shame you for being fragile. He doesn't judge you for breaking. He doesn't withdraw from you because of your wounds. Instead, he moves closer. The Bible says he is near to the brokenhearted and saves those crushed in spirit. That means your brokenness is not a barrier to God. It is a beacon that draws him near. While you hurt, God is strengthening your faith. Pain pushes you to rely on him in ways comfort never will. When life is easy, it's tempting to lean on your own strength, your own plans, your own understanding. But pain strips you of self-reliance and forces you to reach for something greater than your own abilities. And in that reaching, God meets you. In that reaching, God teaches you to trust him on levels you never knew existed. In that reaching, he becomes more real to you than ever before. While you hurt, God is also protecting you. There are battles he fought on your behalf that you never saw. There are dangers he shielded you from that you never recognized. There are people he removed from your life because their presence would have poisoned your future. There are doors he closed that you begged him to open because those doors would have led you into destruction. You may have cried over losses that were really God's mercies in disguise. You may not understand now, but one day you'll look back and say, God, thank you for working even when I didn't know you were. Pain feels like an interruption, but sometimes it is divine intervention. God uses hurt to halt you before you head in the wrong direction. He uses heartbreak to realign your life with his purpose. He uses suffering to sharpen your vision so you can see what you couldn't see before. Pain can be a divine pause, not to punish you, but to prepare you. And while you are paused, God is at work. While you hurt, God is reshaping your character. Pain softens what pride hardens. It humbles you, deepens your empathy, heightens your compassion, and expands your capacity to love and understand others. People who have never hurt deeply often struggle to connect deeply, but when you bled, you recognize the sound of someone else's wound. When you've been broken, you become a safe place for other broken people. When you've cried in the dark, you know how to comfort someone walking through their own midnight. God uses your hurt to make you more human, more loving, more Christ-like. While you hurt, God is working on your endurance. Pain stretches you. It increases your spiritual stamina. It teaches you how to withstand seasons of uncertainty without losing your mind or your faith. It builds resilience, the kind that allows you to face future storms without crumbling. Sometimes God allows you to walk through the fire, not to burn you, but to prove to the fire that you cannot be consumed. While you hurt, God is working on your testimony. The very thing that is breaking you right now will one day be the very thing you stand on as proof that God is faithful. The story you're living today, the one filled with tears, questions, fear, doubt, and sleepless nights, will become the story that lifts someone else tomorrow. God never wastes pain. Every moment you endure is material for a miracle. Every setback becomes a setup for a greater comeback. Every wound becomes a doorway for his glory to shine through. And while you hurt, God is healing you in ways you cannot see. Healing doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it happens quietly, slowly, deep beneath the surface. You might think nothing is changing, but God is stitching what was torn. You might think you're stuck, but God is strengthening what was weakened. You might think you're hopeless, but God is planting hope where despair once lived. One day you'll wake up and realize the pain doesn't sting the same way. One day you'll breathe without heaviness. One day you'll smile without forcing it. One day you'll look in the mirror and see strength where you once saw sorrow. God works while you hurt. You may not feel him, but he is there. You may not understand him, but he is moving. You may not see the progress, but he is healing you. And when the work is finished, you will rise from this pain stronger, wiser and more whole than you ever imagined. Your wound is not your identity. That's the truth many people struggle to grasp, especially when the pain has lingered so long that it feels like it has become a part of who you are. When you've been hurt repeatedly, abandoned unexpectedly, betrayed deeply, or disappointed consistently, the wound begins to whisper names to you. Names like not enough, unwanted, unworthy, broken, damaged, or forgotten. And if you're not careful, you start to wear those names like labels. You start to confuse what happened to you with who you are. But your wound is an event, not a definition. It is a moment in your story, not the title of your life. Pain has a way of convincing us to shrink. It tries to wrap itself around our identity like vines choking the life out of a tree. It can make you believe you're smaller than you are. It can distort your reflection until all you see is the damage and none of the destiny. When your soul is bleeding, it's easy to become convinced that the wound is now your new normal, that you are forever marked by what hurt you. You may find yourself thinking, maybe this is just who I am now. The broken one, the rejected one, the one who is always left behind. But those thoughts are lies. They are the language of wounds, not the language of truth. Wounds speak in temporary pain. Identity speaks in eternal purpose. There is a difference between where you've been and who you are. A person who lived through a storm is not defined by the rain. A survivor of a fire is not defined by the ashes. A heart that has been broken is not defined by the fracture. The fact that you bled does not mean you are the bleeding. The fact that you cried does not mean you are the sorrow. Your wound does not diminish your worth. It does not erase your calling. It does not cancel your value. If anything, the wound becomes a place where depth, empathy, strength, and wisdom are born. Many people who carry wounds attempt to hide them. They put on strength like a costume and smile through the pain because they are afraid of being misjudged or misunderstood. But here is the powerful truth. Your wound is not something to hide in shame, and it is not something to display as identity. It is something to heal from. It is something to grow through. It is something you will one day look back on and say, that hurt me deeply, but it did not define me. It shaped me, but it did not settle me. It wounded me, but it did not name me. We all carry scars. Every scar is a wound that healed. And if you look at a scar long enough, you'll realize that it doesn't tell the story of pain. It tells the story of survival. It speaks of a moment when you were cut deeply, yet somehow you kept going. It reminds you of your own resilience. Scars say, I was hurt here, but I healed. The scar is proof that the wound was real, but it is also proof that it did not last. The wound was a chapter. The scar is a testimony. Which means your wound is not your identity. Your healing is. There are people who will try to define you by what happened to you. They'll say you're the one who fell apart, the one who got divorced, the one who failed, the one who lost, the one who struggled. People love to attach labels based on limited understanding, but do not let their small perspective shape your destiny. People may call you by your wound, but God calls you by your name. People may define you by your past, but God defines you by your purpose. People may identify your pain, but only God identifies your potential. Sometimes the loudest voice that mislabels your identity is your own. Pain can turn your internal dialogue into your worst enemy. You start replaying your failures, repeating your losses, reminding yourself of you. Flaws. You start living as if the wound is a permanent tattoo on the soul. But hear this, you do not owe the wound your future. You do not owe your pain your identity. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to step out of the version of yourself that was shaped by hurting and into the version shaped by healing. Your identity is bigger than the ache you carry. It is rooted in who you were before the pain and who you are destined to become after it. You are more than the betrayal that broke you. You are more than the relationship that failed. You are more than the childhood that wounded you. You are more than the mistake that shamed you. You are more than the loss that crushed you. You are more than the loneliness that shadows you. You are more than the tear-stained nights and the silent suffering. None of that defines you. It influences you, but it does not name you. What defines you is your perseverance, your values, your heart, your spirit, your commitment to rise again, your willingness to grow, your refusal to quit, your capacity to love even after being hurt, your courage to trust again after betrayal, your strength to hope again after disappointment. These are the true markers of your identity, not the wound, but the warrior. There will come a day when the wound that feels overwhelming today will be nothing more than a faded memory. One day you will speak about it without your voice trembling. One day you will reflect on it and realize how far you have come. One day you'll see that what once felt like the end was actually a beginning. Pain introduces you to parts of yourself you didn't know existed. Endurance, wisdom, compassion, power. The wound may have weakened you for a season, but it awakened you for a lifetime. And when you finally step into the fullness of who you are, not the broken version, not the wounded version, be the real, whole, healed version, you will understand that your identity was never found in the bleeding. It was formed in the becoming. You are not your wound. You never were. You are the person who survived it, grew through it, and rose above it. The wound happened, yes, but it did not name you. It did not define you, and it never will. Don't rush the process, but don't stop living. That is one of the hardest balances to strike when your soul is still bleeding. There's a part of you that wants to hurry through the pain, fast forward through the grief, sprint past the heartbreak, and wake up in a future where the wound no longer stings. You want to skip the chapters where it hurts to breathe, where your thoughts are heavy, where everything reminds you of what you lost or what broke you. But healing does not move at the speed of your impatience. Healing moves at the speed of honesty. It takes time, it takes presence, it takes surrender, and no matter how badly you want the pain to vanish, no matter how desperately you wish you could heal overnight, some things cannot be rushed without being ruined. When you rush healing, you only bury what will rise again later. You create a temporary relief that becomes a long-term setback, because whatever you don't face today will demand your attention tomorrow. Whatever you suppress will surface, often more aggressively than before. Pain is not healed by pretending, it's healed by processing. And processing takes time, sometimes more than you expected, sometimes more than you wanted. But time is not your enemy. Time is your ally. Time gives space for clarity, space for reflection, space for rebuilding. Time helps you breathe again. Time helps you understand what really happened. Time helps you strengthen the parts of you that were weakened by the wound. But while you must respect the pace of your healing, you cannot treat your life like it's on pause. Pain will tell you to shut down. It will tell you to shrink. It will tell you to withdraw from the world and wait until you feel whole again before reemerging. But if you stop living while you wait to be healed, you will lose more of yourself in the waiting. Life continues even when your heart is bleeding. And you cannot afford to freeze just because the discomfort feels overwhelming. Sometimes the only way to survive the valley is to keep walking through it. Not rushing the process means allowing yourself to grieve without guilt. It means embracing the truth that some days will be slow, some days will be messy, some days will be heavy. It means giving yourself permission to feel without shame. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to force a smile when your soul is aching. You don't have to pretend you're healed just to make others comfortable. You don't have to have it all together. Healing requires authenticity, not performance. It requires honesty, not perfection. When you stop rushing, you stop faking. And when you stop faking, you can finally start truly healing. But not stopping your life means continuing to show up in the small ways that matter. It means you still eat. You still sleep. You still take care of your responsibilities. You still reach out for help. You still go for walks. You still breathe intentionally. You still allow joy to peek in, even if only for a moment. You still allow new experiences, even if you aren't fully ready. Healing happens in motion, not in isolation. Life can stretch your soul even when it's hurting. Sometimes a sunset softens you. Sometimes a conversation strengthens you. Sometimes helping someone else lifts you. Sometimes a laugh restores a little of what pain took. You don't have to be fully healed to live fully. There's a tendency in deep pain to feel guilty for any moan. Joy, as if smiling somehow betrays your suffering or moving forward dishonors your past. But joy and healing are not betrayal. They are survival. They are reminders that the wound didn't swallow you whole. They are proof that even in sorrow, light still finds a way in. They are hints of the healing that's unfolding quietly beneath the surface. Don't silence joy just because pain is present. Let them coexist. Healing rarely comes all at once. It arrives in small glimpses, little breakthroughs, subtle shifts. If you're too busy rushing the process, you'll miss the tiny miracles happening along the way. Don't stop living also means embracing the truth that rest is part of progress. Some days you won't have the strength to move fast, but even resting is movement when you rest with intention. Rest allows the soul to gather itself. Rest is not laziness, it is recovery. Healing requires energy, and sometimes the most productive thing you can do is pause, breathe, and gather the strength to face another day. Balance is the key. Don't rush ahead of your heart, but don't abandon your life in the name of recovery. When you stop rushing the process, you allow the wound to close naturally. You allow wisdom to rise from the pain. You allow your emotions to teach you what they came to reveal. Healing is not just about feeling better, it's about becoming better. It's about understanding the parts of you that may have been overlooked, neglected, or misunderstood. It's about growing into a stronger, wiser, more compassionate version of yourself. None of that can be microwaved. Transformation requires patience. And when you refuse to stop living, you keep your future within reach. You don't give pain the power to steal your purpose. You don't surrender your joy, your dreams, your connections, or your potential. You may not be able to run right now, but you can still move. You may not be able to give your all, but you can give something. You may not be able to shine brightly, but you can keep your light lit. So don't rush your healing. It's sacred work, and sacred work takes time. But don't put your life on hold until you feel whole, because living is part of what will make you whole again. Healing is a journey, not a race. And as long as you keep moving without forcing, keep breathing without collapsing, keep living without retreating, you will one day wake up and realize that you are stronger than you ever imagined, softer in the best places, wiser in the deepest ways, and more alive than you've ever been. You don't heal alone. Even though pain often convinces you to isolate yourself, even though the bleeding of the soul makes you want to retreat into silence, even though the weight of hurt can make you feel like you're safer in solitude, the truth is that healing requires connection. Human beings were not created to carry pain in solitude. We were created with the need for community, the need for support, the need for presence. But when you're hurting, it becomes easy to believe the lie that no one would understand. No one can handle your truth. No one can sit with your sorrow without trying to fix it or judge it. Pain whispers that isolation is protection, when in reality, isolation is often a prison. You don't heal alone because healing itself is relational. Most wounds come from relationships, from betrayal, disappointment, abandonment, rejection, or loss. And ironically, the very thing that broke you is often the very thing that helps mend you: connection. Not just any connection, but the right kind. The kind of connection that listens more than it speaks. The kind that sits with you without trying to rush you. The kind that respects your process. The kind that holds space for your tears instead of telling you to wipe them. The kind that reminds you that you are not crazy, not weak, not dramatic, not too much. The kind that looks at your pain and says, "I'm not leaving." Sometimes healing requires the presence of a friend, a mentor, a pastor, a therapist, or a loved one who can see what you cannot see while you're bleeding. When you're hurting, your perspective becomes distorted. Pain pulls a curtain over your vision, and everything feels darker than it is. Your thoughts begin to spiral. Your insecurities become louder. Your fears become exaggerated. In those moments, someone else's voice, steady, wise, compassionate, can become a lifeline. A person who can remind you of who you are, what you've survived, what you're becoming. Someone who can speak truth when your mind is filled with lies. You don't heal alone, because healing is a shared journey. Think about the times in your life when someone simply being there made the unbearable a little lighter. You may not remember what they said, but you remember that they stayed. Presence is medicine, not the kind that fixes everything instantly, but the kind that keeps you from breaking further. Sometimes healing doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from someone sitting across the table, someone holding your hand during the silence, someone checking on you when the world thinks you're fine, someone sending a message that says, just making sure you're okay. The danger of trying to heal alone is that you begin to believe your pain is too big for others to hold, but often we underestimate the capacity of those around us. The people who love you don't want to see you bleed in silence. They don't want you to shrink into your suffering. They don't want you to pretend. They want to walk with you, even if they don't have all the answers, and even if they don't know how to fix it. Their presence can be the very thing God uses to keep your soul afloat. And then there's the other side of connection, vulnerability. Vulnerability is the doorway through which healing enters. You cannot be healed from what you're unwilling to reveal. You may not need to tell your story to everyone, but you need to tell it to someone. You need at least one safe place where you can take off the mask, where you don't have to be strong, where your tears don't have to be held back. Healing is hindered by secrecy. When you hide your pain grows. When you expose your pain in a safe environment, your pain begins to shrink. The darkness of wounds loses power when brought into light. You don't heal alone because God Himself often uses people as instruments of restoration. The comfort someone gives you may be the comfort God placed in them for this exact moment. The wisdom they speak may be the wisdom God deposited in them for your journey. The hand they extend may be the very hand God intended to reach you. Healing is divine, but it is also communal. God heals hearts, but He often sends people to hold them together while the healing takes place. And healing is reciprocal. The people you lean on today may lean on you tomorrow. The strength you borrow from them now, you may return in a different season. Pain creates compassion. Hurt creates understanding. When someone helps you heal, it creates a bond that lasts long after the wound has closed. Don't heal alone, because shared pain becomes shared humanity. Shared humanity becomes shared strength. Healing also happens in environments, not just in conversations. Sometimes you heal by being around joy, laughter, hope, and light. Being surrounded by life can reignite your own. You may find healing in community spaces, in worship, in fellowship, in gatherings where you are reminded that you are part of something larger than your suffering. Isolation narrows your world until all you see is pain. Community widens your world until you remember that pain is only one piece of your story. But mistake this truth. Healing with others does not mean depending on others to carry all your pain. It means allowing others to help you carry some of it while you regain strength. It means allowing people to walk beside you, not for you. It means you do the inner work, but you don't do it in isolation. It means you open the door for support, not surrender your autonomy. Healing is strongest when shared, but it is not outsourced. And perhaps one of the most beautiful reasons you don't heal alone is this: someone else's healing may be connected to yours. The story you're living today, the one filled with tears, lessons, and survival, may one day be the story that rescues someone else from their own darkness. Your healing creates a path that others can follow. Your journey becomes a map. Your survival becomes hope. You heal with others, through others, and eventually for others. No, you don't heal alone. And you were never meant to. Pain isolates, but healing gathers. Pain silences, but healing speaks. Pain closes the heart, but healing reopens it. And as you allow yourself to lean, to open, to receive, to connect, you will discover that the weight that once felt impossible begins to lift, not because it's gone, but because you're no longer carrying it alone. The E-knee. My attacks most when you're weakest. That truth is as old as time, yet it always feels personal when you're the one in that vulnerable place. When your soul is bleeding, when your strength is low, when your hope is thin, when your confidence is shaken and your spirit is tired, that is when the enemy whispers the loudest. He doesn't attack when you're standing strong, grounded, confident and clear-minded. He attacks when you are already wounded, because a wounded person is easier to discourage, easier to deceive, and easier to derail. When you're weak, your mind becomes a battlefield. Every thought feels heavier. Every fear feels louder. Every insecurity feels sharper. What wouldn't bother you on a strong day becomes overwhelming on a weak one. The enemy knows this. He studies patterns. He waits for the cracks in your armor. He watches for the moments when your defenses are lowered. Moments when your emotions are raw, when your heart is tired of fighting, when your faith feels stretched thin. Those are the moments when he sneaks in to plant seeds of doubt, discouragement, despair, and confusion. He whispers things that sound like your own thoughts. You'll never get better. You're not strong enough. You don't matter. Everybody leaves you. You're always going to be broken. You're failing. You're alone in this. He knows how to weaponize your insecurities. He knows how to amplify your fears until they drown out truth. He knows how to take your pain and twist it into a narrative of hopelessness. When your soul is bleeding, the enemy doesn't just attack you. He attacks your identity, your purpose, your faith, your future, your worth. Because if he can break you in your weakest moments, he knows he can keep you from rising into the strength that's waiting for you. But here's the deeper truth. Weakness is not failure. Weakness is not evidence that God has abandoned you. Weakness is simply the place where your humanity is exposed and where God's strength is poised to enter. The enemy sees weakness as an opportunity to destroy you. God sees weakness as an opportunity to strengthen you. That's why the enemy comes hardest when you're at your lowest, because he knows God is closest in those moments. He knows heaven leans in when your heart leans down. He knows that the place where you feel most vulnerable is often the place where God is preparing to reveal his power. When you're strong, your confidence rests in your abilities. But when you're weak, you learn to rely on God in a deeper way. You don't have the energy to pretend. You don't have the strength to perform. You don't have the pride to push through on your own. Weakness strips away illusions and brings you face to face with your own limitations, but it also brings you face to face with God's unlimited strength. The enemy attacks because he wants to stop you before you discover what happens when God fills those broken places. Weakness is not the end. It is the opening. It's the space where your desperation becomes fertile ground for divine intervention. It's the moment where you pray not out of routine, but out of need. It's the moment you reach for God, not because everything is going right, but because everything is falling apart. Those are the prayers heaven moves toward with urgency. Those are the prayers that turn breaking points into breakthroughs. The enemy attacks because he knows what's about to happen if you hold on, even in your weakest state. When you're weak, he also tries to push you into isolation. He wants you alone with your thoughts. He wants you too embarrassed to ask for help, too ashamed to confess that you're hurting, too afraid to let anyone see your bleeding soul. Because isolation makes the wound deeper. Pain grows louder in silence. Lies grow stronger in the dark. If he can keep you alone long enough, hopelessness will try to settle in your spirit. That's why it's important to recognize that the attack is not evidence of defeat. It's evidence of your value. The enemy doesn't waste his efforts on people who pose no threat to the future. He attacks those who carry purpose. He attacks those who are destined to rise. He attacks those who are on the brink of transformation. Another tactic he uses during your weakness is distraction. When you're hurting, your discernment can feel blurry. Your emotional exhaustion can make you vulnerable to old habits, toxic connections, unhealthy coping mechanisms, and destructive patterns. He offers temporary relief that leads to long-term regret. He offers shortcuts that sabotage your process. He offers comfort that becomes captivity. That's why moments of weakness require alertness, not because you're failing, but because attack is predictable in these seasons. But let's flip the script. Yes, the enemy attacks when you're weak, but weakness is also where resilience is born. Weakness is where strength is rebuilt. Weakness is where character is refined. Weakness is where humility is formed. Weakness is where dependence on God deepens. Weakness is where you learn to fight smarter, not harder. When you're weak, you are not beyond help. You are within reach. You are not too fragile. You are being fortified. You are not too broken. You are being rebuilt. The enemy attacks when you're weak because he fears what you will become once you heal. He fears the clarity that will come after the confusion lifts. He fears the power you'll walk in once you regain your footing. He fears the testimony that will rise from the ashes of what you're enduring now. He fears the strength you'll rise. After surviving something you thought would destroy you, he fears the person you are becoming, the person your weakness is shaping, the person God is restoring, the person pain is refining. So yes, the attacks come when you're weakest. The whispers grow louder, the doubts grow sharper, the discouragement feels heavier. But that weakness is not a sign that you are losing. It is a sign that you are transitioning. It is the place where the enemy fights hardest because he knows your breakthrough is near. And when you realize that your weakest moments are also the moments where God's strength is most available, you begin to understand that no attack can stop what heaven has already started in you. Weakness does not mean defeat. It means the battle is shifting in your favor.